Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Michelle Waterson Gomez of imparting chortles on his homies, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday, the 18th of July, following a UFC not at the Apex, at a proper stadium, so some effort was put into the card. Ortega versus Rodriguez, featherweight tilt in the main event. I suppose we should start with that because it was a bit of a damp squib. It started out well, started out strong, ended about just as things were just getting interesting is when it ended. Really quite sad. But in the Boycast, we were talking about some of the difficulties that Brian Ortega has by being a fighter with a missing middle ground. One of the reasons that they always say that wrestling is the best base for MMA is that if you control the wrestling to a decent degree, you decide where the fight is happening. Or at least you have access to that door. If you're getting outstruck, you go, okay, well, hold on, we're going to the mat. If you don't like your chances on the mat, you keep the fight standing. If you suck at both, you enter a clinch and you push to the fence. And you just keep the fight in that transitionary position. Brian Ortega has decent striking, or at least he can bang, and great submissions, but no middle ground. There's nothing connecting the two together. So if his striking stops working, he's really completely out of luck because he's not going to take the guy down most of the time. Now, in fairness to him, in the Volkanovski fight, it looked like he'd been working on it at least, and in this one, he actually got to it early and often because his takedown percentage completed prior to this in the UFC was dreadful, and he only really went for them when he was in trouble. This one, straight out of the gate, he's applying pressure, he's walking Rodriguez back, and he's looking for takedowns. And we were saying, obviously, anytime you're dealing with a great kicker, you got to back him up because they have to have a certain amount of space to kick and get away freely. If they kick from too close, they're on one leg, you're close enough to chin them or run through them straight to the mat. So they're constantly adjusting this distance, and if you put them under pressure constantly, they have to do it a lot quicker, they have a lot more to think about or at least to react to. And that gets very tiring very quickly. The famous example in MMA is Fedor Emelianenko versus Mirko Cro Cop. Outstruck Cro Cop on the feet by backing him up the whole time. But we were also saying that Max Holloway did that to Rodriguez, and Rodriguez actually kicked and ran, which is the part that tires you out. And he did it for a pretty long time in that fight without looking like he'd been doing it. You know, he was looking pretty fresh. And ultimately, I didn't like that Ortega was sort of walking him back, but also sort of walking up to him and then stopping, letting Rodriguez kick and then trying to chase him back. So the kick and run was working quite well for Rodriguez. The ring cutting wasn't elite from Ortega by any means, but when he did duck into a clinch in the early going, he was allowed to just walk Rodriguez back to the fence in the over-under. The level change was good, though, timed it well. His boxing, as ever, looks pretty slow. I mean, he's a powerful hitter, and he's game on the feet, and he'll time guys quite well, but he is also sort of the Homer Simpson of the division. He's not hard to hit, and he just sort of walks through it. Also, the low kicks were going in unanswered, and his own kicks were a non-factor. We were saying this in the pre-fight, but he's a guy who, one of the main advantages you take away from having a difficult bottom game is that you can kick more freely, because if the guy takes a bad shot, he might get guillotined or caught in a triangle on the way down or something like that. Think Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira. But Charles Oliveira kicks more than almost anyone in the game because he can get away with it. If the guy dumps into his back and he doesn't grab something on the way down, he'll just work his way up to the feet by creating openings through submissions and spins and all sorts of shit. Brian Ortega doesn't benefit from the threat of his ground game because he's not kicking all the time. If he was kicking all the time, people would be grabbing him or ignoring them and just taking kicks, which is the useful part of that. Well, it's a two-pronged thing, but complete non-factor for the most part, his kicks. And really, when you're backing someone up, you can be scoring, and they're circling the cage and working a little bit faster than you. The early going, it should be that they're able to get away from you because they're having to sprint out into openings. And then as they slow down, you should be able to corner them. But one way to really speed that up is when they start circling along the cage, kick the trailing leg. Low kicks are largely free along the fence, but not a single one from Ortega, which was, sad, but expected. But the wrestling was pretty decent. Went to the body lock, pushed to the fence, and started working the modern cage wrestling meta. Threaten the outside trip, then step inside between their legs and try and hip throw them over. And it was the second one of those, late in the round, he actually hit a hip throw all the way over, but not into a flat position. Rodriguez managed to throw his knee back in and start throwing up that, bottom side control, bridge, knees in, try and armbar them in sort of a not ideal armbar position, but you can get them there. And they have to address it, which is the important thing. They have to get out of it, and then they're back behind your legs in your guard. And this is one of the interesting things that we were talking about coming into this week. Brian Ortega is billed as this amazing grappler, but there are a lot of elements to grappling. It's like me billing John Jones as an amazing striker. In some regards, he's a very, very good striker, but he doesn't really use his punches at all for the most part, with the odd left straight to the body or whatever. But when I say striker, you think of knocking people out with their hands, or most people do. And you can be a great striker without having really any degree of competence in one area of the fight or the striking game. And that's true with jiu-jitsu as well. You'll probably be competent, but there are guys who are... Well, it's kind of like if you consider grappling as a whole. Andre Galvao, one of the greatest grapplers of all time, amazing guard passer, couldn't get people down in his MMA career because he didn't have the wrestling. But the same holes can exist on the ground. You could be amazing with a guillotine and all the attacks off it. Brian Ortega is amazing with the front headlock. He loves grabbing the front headlock on the feet or as they shoot, or if he's knocked them over and they're wrestling back up into him, he'll grab the front headlock, he'll roll to his back and roll them over the top, and he'll roll into a mount and try and triangle them from there, or he'll start working for Darcy's and anaconda chokes. He does an amazing anaconda choke when they're both looking at the ceiling, the old Rafa Mendez special. But that's nothing to do with passing the guard, which is another element of grappling, which we honestly haven't seen him have to do. And I said that would be quite interesting against Yair Rodriguez, because at some point Rodriguez is going to be bundled over off a kick. But when you bundle someone over off a kick, you're almost always behind their legs. You're not inside control or pinning them to the mat. You're in some form of guard. And it was interesting that in this fight, Ortega actually threw past the guard, but didn't have the control, so the guard immediately came back in. And then the armbar came up. And we haven't got to it yet, but unfortunate injury stopped this fight. In the course of trying to stack out of the armbar and slip his elbow free, he managed to yank his shoulder out of its socket, immediately stopped fighting. And respect to Yair Rodriguez, because he realised that something was wrong too. A lot of times guys will come up from there being like, why is he stopped? And just go, well, now's my chance. I better fucking throw some punches. But yes, apparently Ortega's shoulder popped out. And apparently this has happened to him before. I have heard with shoulders dislocations, it's something that can reoccur. Or is more likely to happen if it's happened once, rather. But this is one of those things, because, yes, it's a TKO or it's a technical submission. It's a legitimate finish. He was isolating one limb and going after it, and in the course of trying to escape that limb and take pressure off it, the pressure on that limb, as he was pulling his body back, separated his shoulder. It's one of those things where I think people think that submissions are more scientific than they often are. Because with a joint lock, you are targeting one joint in a chain of joints, but things can happen above and below that joint just based on how they move. It could just be like a pre-existing thing in their own body, like this shoulder separation. But think of Frank Mir driving his iron cup through Tim Sylvia's forearm. If your cup is on their forearm, you've already lost the elbow extending armbar, the actual armbar. You're in something different. And it helps to be 260 pounds and Hulk strong. But that's still a legitimate submission because he managed to, he made it so that Tim Sylvia couldn't continue in the fight. I have been laughing at people for years because in judo judo just banned the Peruvian necktie this week. But apparently it's always been banned, but they were just reiterating the ruling or something like that. Loads of people have done really well with Peruvian neckties and gi variations in judo. What's her name? Is it Gerbi? There was a Israeli judoka, a female judoka, who was amazing with it, and they called it like the Gerbi choke. And apparently the French team are all awesome at the Peruvian necktie as well. So it's just another case of the IJF, the International Judo Federation, banning something because they fancy it. But the IJF has always had this difficult thing where they allow kimuras even though shoulder locks are illegal in judo. But you'll know that like most kimuras, the trick is to get the hand behind the opponent's body and push it up their back, which is the sort of like police arm lock, hammer lock style. And that puts pressure on the shoulder. But they insist in old judo text and shit, they go, oh, well, no, this is actually a lock on the elbow. And that's what it does. And 90% of kimuras you see are going to go straight to the shoulder. But I got caught in a kimura a couple of months ago, and it shot straight to my elbow while I was defending it. And my elbow's been sore ever since. So I now respect that the kimura can affect the elbow. I still think it's bullshit that they're pretending it's not a shoulder lock when you see most of them completed it is literally just attacking the shoulder. But lots of things can go wrong at lots of points with a joint lock that don't make it the perfect break you expect it to be. Another one's toe holds. A toe hold can fuck up your ankle or it can fuck up your knee. It's the same range, it's the same motion of the joint lock or the joint attack, but for some reason, some people get hurt one place and some people get hurt another. And squirming out of submissions is a common way to cause yourself an injury anyway. Think of something like a knee bar. People don't try to laterally knee bar people, which is where you've basically you're knee barring them, but their knees going sideways. People don't attack that. But in the course of trying to squirm out of a knee bar, you will put yourself in what can sometimes be a more catastrophic break for your leg. So respect to Yair Rodriguez, I thought that was a great attack. I was really intrigued by Brian Ortega attacking wrestling and doing so successfully. Rodriguez was winning on the feet, but Brian Ortega is just a painfully slow starter and also incredibly hittable. I think, they're talking about doing Emmett versus Rodriguez for like an interim title, sort of confirming that Alexander Volkanovski's getting a lightweight fight, even though they confirmed during the broadcast that Charles Oliveira's defending his title against Makhachev. God knows the plan there. But I wouldn't mind seeing them run this back. I don't think you shouldn't count it as a win for Rodriguez. I think it is a win for Rodriguez, very fairly. But I do think it's a very compelling fight, and there's not a lot going on in that division right now, so you could run it back. But then if Ortega wins, you got nothing following that either. You kind of don't want him to win because no one wants to see him fight Volkanovski. I mean, you might for entertainment reasons, but no one thinks that he's a compelling matchup at this point. So that's sort of let down out of the way. Let's talk about some of the other stuff on this card. What was really good? Oh, Matt Schnell versus Sumudaerji was terrific. This was really, really interesting because I was pointing out Matt Schnell was on a 1-3 streak or 1-3 run, and Sumudaerji was on, I think, a 3-fight winning streak. So it was kind of weird matchmaking to put them together in the first place. But Matt Schnell, man, respect for this win because not only did he take a beating to get it done, he also won with a triangle choke, which is so rare at the high levels now. Tony Ferguson's triangle choke over Kevin Lee was the only triangle choke that year in the UFC. Donald Cerrone will occasionally pick one up, but they are so rare at high levels of competition. And Matt Schnell hit 2 in 1 year in the UFC, and I think this might be his 3rd in the UFC. Yeah, crazy. So Sumudaerji, long southpaw, throws in the long left straight, really hurts people, very tall. And I thought Matt Schnell's boxing looked pretty good in the early going. He was walking him down, and then Sumudaerji would try and circle off to his left along the fence, and Matt Schnell would step across to his right and cut him off, and then throw the right hand, or he'd throw the right hand and then step off to his right. It was really nice. If you watch Matt Schnell's footwork in the early going, I thought that was really good for a guy that I consider mainly a grappler. And then he was also landing counter left hooks, which is a great weapon against the southpaw. For the southpaw against an orthodox fighter, the counter right hook is a great weapon. It's just such an awkward angle to deal with, and it sneaks through short and over your shoulder, so you don't see it coming. And I thought he was doing great work there. And then Sumudaerji hit him with a left straight on the chin that just buckled him. Well, no, it didn't buckle him. I mean, it just shook him to his boots. And then Matt Schnell kept walking forward. And it was one of those situations where you're going, everyone at home's going, oh my God, don't let him hit you with that left hand again. But if there's no break and you're just standing there, you can't really make an adjustment. If you were having trouble with it before you were rocked, you're not going to be able to adjust while you're rocked. But the second time Sumudaerji hurt him with a left hand was gorgeous. He did a little backward gallop. And when I say gallop, I talk about galloping footwork a lot. But if you're advancing, so we'll say you're a southpaw, so your right foot's forward. If you're advancing, you go right foot, left foot. So the foot that's in front, you move first. The foot that's behind, you move second. And if you're moving to your right, you move the foot that's to your right first, and then you move your left foot second. If you're moving to your left foot first, and your right foot second. And if you're moving back, your back foot first, and your front foot second. It's always outside foot, inside foot. The foot that is in the direction you want to go, and then the one that's trailing. Galloping footwork is where, if I want to go forward, I bring my back foot up underneath me first, and then I really push forward off it with my front foot. Or if I'm galloping backwards, I go front foot back to my back foot so that they're almost touching, and then I step back with my back foot so that I'm in a long stance again. And those are really good for going backwards with counters. So you'll see Conor McGregor used to do it back in the day, but Sean O'Malley, if you watch his fight with Thomas Almeida, that's a great example. Throws a front kick, gallops back, lands the left hand across the top of Almeida's right hand as he's sort of lunging in behind his chin. But Sumudaerji did a beautiful little tempo shift, which we were talking about the other day with, was it Umar Nurmagomedov? Lifted a kick up at one speed and then changed it and kicked him in the face. But he did sort of like a slow trot back and then a fast explode forward with his left hand. And it's such a neat little trick. We talked about it with Trinaldo and other people. If you walk off to your left at one speed and then you bound back in at double speed, you really throw people off. So he did a little skip back lazily and then shot forward and smashed him in the chin with his left hand. And Schnell was on Queer Street. He was all over the place. So he went double forearms guard up high, hoping to just take the punches. And that can be, if the guy's just shooting left straights, if you get your forearms up and you keep them close in front of your face, it could be trickier for the guy to put you away. But Sumudaerji did what I love seeing fighters do against a hurt opponent or an opponent that's just covering up and walking forward. He put his hands out on top of Schnell's hands. Because if their hands are up in their guard and you put your hands on top of them, they're not going to be able to punch you through your hands. They're going to have to drop their hands underneath your hands and try and punch up from underneath. And when they drop their hands, you could chin them. Or you can duck whatever you think is coming. You know, if you watch Daniel Cormier, George Foreman, a couple of these guys who do like mummy stance work, you put your hands on the opponents, they're not going to shoot straight through your hands. So when you see or feel them looping their blow out around their hands, you've got time to duck. But he put his hands on Schnell's hands to handcuff him, and then he turned his elbow over because the elbows are free. The thing about double hand trapping, as it's called, or double hand checking, if you do it in boxing, which, as I said, George Foreman did, and Sandy Sadler as well, but not many guys do it, or did it, which is why I use those two examples all the time. But if you do that, you sort of have to find a moment to free one of your hands, pull it back halfway, and then jab with it, or throw a short right straight with it. You're occupying your hands by checking theirs, but you are only allowed to hit with your hands. So you have to find a space to build some power in one of your hands, at which time you're going to have to take your hand off their hands. Whereas in Muay Thai and MMA, you can fold your arm over and hit them with the elbow behind their hand, which is fantastic. And if you grab their wrist at the same time, you can pull their hand down. So he smashed him. He's a southpaw, so he'd been hitting with the left straight, but he turned over these beautiful right elbows. He's just smashing him in the chin with them. Schnell's all over the place. But Schnell managed to survive, and he'd been landing this nice outside slip. He'd slip to the elbow side of Sumudaerji's left straight, the one that obviously he was worried about the entire fight. But he'd been landing a nice counter right uppercut left hook off that. And, like I said, the left hook was an issue for Sumudaerji. It's quite interesting because, Sumudaerji is so much taller than him, but the right uppercut really did make him overreact a lot of times. And in the course of surviving, Schnell hits him with a right uppercut left hook, and Sumudaerji's behaviour completely changes. We're always talking about behaviour changes. If you spot someone who's winning, stop doing something. Then, or if you stop someone who's been striking, if you see someone who's been striking actively, stop striking. Something's happened to them. So he immediately stopped striking and started going backwards, and then Matt Schnell did a little level change as if he was going to go for a takedown and shot a right straight up the centre. Beautiful technique. Knocked Sumudaerji on his arse, got on top, hit him with a few elbows, passed to mount. Sumudaerji bridged and rolled, and Schnell locked in his triangle that he's been using forever. Amazing fight. Can't rave enough about this one. I'm really glad it made it onto the main card because I thought it was on the prelims, but couple of weird aftermath moments in this one. It was a very bloody ending because they were both bleeding all over the place, especially because Schnell had been elbowed and then he elbowed Sumudaerji load on the ground. But there was a great photo of Schnell having released the triangle and looking wide-eyed, having just won, and Sumudaerji on the mat on his back. And I think it was Sports Center shared that with the normies, so all the normies reacted to it. This was on ABC, which is apparently a really big channel, so plenty of normies saw it. But the replies to that are just people going, "This isn't a sport, this is bloodbath, blah, blah, blah." It sums up the societal problem with sports and contact sports generally. People think that if you're bleeding, you're getting brain damage, and if you're not bleeding, you're fine. If you lose a bit of blood in a fight, you're not going to lose a pint, 2 pints. You're going to lose a bit, and then it's going to clot eventually. Very, very occasionally, there's a horrible gash that someone says they start feeling faint just from the blood loss. But you grow blood back. Whereas, there's no blood in American football. But that game is genuinely fucking harrowing stuff coming out of that. And the best part is that all these people who are saying this is a bloodbath, don't show this on TV, in the comments, I'd float over their profile and it would list a load of NFL teams they liked. Or even hockey, which is a sport that allows punching people with no helmet on ice. So if you fall, if you get knocked out, you're taking a back of the head on the ice. But the NFL one's just really tragic because they've got guys who are shooting themselves in the chest to preserve their brain for study. How scared do you have to be of what's going on with your brain that you're willing to kill yourself and be like, I need to know, or I need people to know what was wrong with me afterwards? And these are guys who've won to a good degree and made a ton of money in the biggest league in America. Say what you will about MMA and boxing, haven't had many of these high-profile suicides or murder-suicides that NFL seems to have a lot of, with them subsequently being found to have CTE. And then the other sad note was that apparently Sumudaerji's, he was wearing knee braces, and that's always an odd move for someone who's not going to be trying to grapple. You see guys use it if they think they're going to, if they think that their path to winning is the grappling, but they might not be able to get on top all the time, or they might get bucked off, they tend to use the knee braces for friction, if you're playing half guards and things like that. But it came out afterwards that Sumudaerji has a torn ACL, and he took this fight because he needed the money, which is really sad. I don't know what he's earning because the UFC has gone to lengths to hide the payouts, but I would guess it's something like 20 and 20. And of course, now that he's said that he injured it before the fight, there's no chance of tricking the UFC into paying for it. Though he did get a fight of the night bonus, so that's a nice upside. So what else was good on this card? Li Jingliang beat Muslim Salikhov in what I thought was a really good performance. It's kind of like his fight with Zaleski. I don't think of Jingliang as a great boxer, but he does do things that draw out the boxing flaws in others. Muslim Salikhov, I put up the Filthy Casual's guide to him again because nobody saw it the first time round, and I don't think anyone's seen it the second time round. But it's a real in-the-weeds one because it was one of those ones where I got to pull out a specific interesting tactic that this guy uses, and also a giant flaw, and also got to link it in with Roberto Duran. So if you've not seen it, go watch it because it's all that fun stuff in it. But the tactic that he uses constantly is a shoulder feint and retreat. I called it a jab and retreat on the pre-fight show, forgetting that he really rarely commits to the jab. You can jab and retreat and not really commit to the jab, but he almost always shoulder feints and then backs up because he wants you to lash out at him, and then he'll kick your lead leg on the counter, or he'll spin on the counter, or he'll throw a counter punch. But he will only ever hit people when they come to him. And if they don't react for like 8 or 9 of these shoulder feint and retreats, he'll step up and throw like a spinning kick or something to look good. But he's very hard. You're hard pushed to get him on the lead. He'll occasionally throw a body jab with commitment, but for the most part, I was saying that he's barely ever committed to the jab. If he had a legitimate jab as a weapon, he would be able to convince people that he was stepping in for real more often. If you watch this fight, Jingliang, there's a couple of really nice moments where he's not biting on this shoulder feint and retreat, because he must have seen it in the pre-fight footage or whatever. But he's just going, no, not responding to that. And then later on, as Salikhov steps in for the feint part before retreating, Jin Liang just steps up and kicks him in the leg. So he's not fainting, he's giving an easy counter at that point. And then Muslim Salikhov starts trying to go forward, throws the first committed jab of his career at 38 years old, and Jin Liang fires a right hand across the top and puts him on stilts. Puts him on ice and then freezes him like Elsa, if you will. Yeah, got the knockout. Beautiful work. Really sad because that's what Salikhov should have been working on up to this point in his career, actually being able to land the jab. Tried it late in this fight because he was already losing, and loses directly as a result of it. And now he's never going to try that again. He's 38 years old. He's not going to learn to jab. But good for Jin Liang. I thought he looked great. Looked sharp. Always been a powerful hitter. And always been difficult enough to confuse very good guys. On the feet, at least. Not smart enough to not immediately throw his right hand at Khamzat and get taken down. I'm glad that the discourse around Khamzat has become more reasonable following Gilbert Burns. But going into that Burns fight, there were people who were like, he's just unstoppable. And I'm going like, there was 3 or 4 examples I put together in a clip of just guys coming out and immediately throwing their right hand at him and him just ducking under it immediately. The last thing you do against a guy who wants to shoot right off the bat is square your hips and throw a hard punch. Like, you want to let him work, you want to feel out the round a bit, you want to let him maybe shoot at you when you haven't opened up. But the reactive double is the easiest double leg to complete in all of MMA. And these 3 guys just came out and swung at him. It's kind of like Jailton Almeida has this move where he comes out, he immediately throws a front kick to the face up the middle, knowing that the guy will stand bolt upright, and he drops to his knees and does the double leg immediately afterwards. It's a set play. It's not having super elite wrestling that's winning him this exchange. It's that he's doing this thing that he knows how the opponent will react. If you throw a right hand right off the bat, you're very easy to take down. Amanda Lemos got her win over Michelle Waterson, who's now Michelle Waterson Gomez in the co-main event. Yeah, kind of a dull first round. Waterson did try and wrestle, which I thought would be interesting because I've always said she's a better grappler than striker, but I've also always said that the UFC need an atomweight division because she's far too small to be competing at strawweight. But she still does throw some lasses at strawweight, which is impressive. But second round, she ended up getting bundled over, coming up from her knees and getting her head caught in a guillotine, and Lemos got the win. Wasn't particularly eventful or interesting, but that's Michelle Waterson fight in a nutshell. Oh, Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain. Schnell versus Sumudaerji got fight of the night, but this also should have got fight of the night. Did this get anything of the night? Good Lord, it didn't get anything. That's absurd. We talked about this a lot on the pre-fight, on the Boycast, because I think Shane Burgos is a guy with a ton of potential who often fights in ways that don't actually accentuate his strengths. He sort of walks forward towards people and he waits for a punch to slip and then comes back with a counter. And that's not the way to offensively counterfight. Offensive counterfighting is about moving forward with the intention of hitting the opponent until they and if they lash out, you move and hit them anyway. If his opponent's not lashing out, he sort of just tends to walk towards them until they do. And he gets into these tit-for-tat exchanges where he looks really pleased with himself for slipping and countering or getting hit and countering. And you're going, no, you should be snowballing. You should be pushing this advantage constantly. Ideally, by the second round, you don't want them throwing punches at all. You want to be throwing all the punches. And the first round, I thought he actually did a good job backing Charles Jourdain up. Jourdain was often going southpaw, throwing a left high kick. If you we talked about this tons before, but Skarbowski, the great French Nakmoy, talks about it a lot, but throw a left high kick on the arm. Not only does it hurt people and keep their right hand by their head so that they're not throwing it, but it also off-balances them. And if you throw a good hard kick on the arm, and then you can move in an attack, as Carlos Leal was doing to Ray Cooper, the third, or you can just make space to circle around the ring. So if you think the guy's trying to walk you down, kick him in the arm, circle off. It's kind of like a low kick. If you kick someone in the leg while they're chasing after you, it picks their leg up for a second. They've got to get their balance back. You've got a chance to run away. But instead, you're just kicking them nice and high over the top of their center of gravity, pushing them over, pushing them off their stance, and they have to catch themselves a little bit, and you run around to the side again. And of course, it sets up left straights down the center and so on. But Burgos was walking him down. I really liked the Burgos. Once the arm kick had landed a couple of times, Burgos was parrying it down to the mat, as opposed to throwing it past him. We talk about this a lot with parrying kicks, but when you parry a kick across yourself, you often set them up to spin. Certainly with Jourdain, he's going to spin. But think of all the people recently who have moved in on what was a missed kick and then eaten a back fist or a back elbow or whatever. Most notably, Joanne Jacek against Zhang Weili. But if you parry and throw someone's leg across you, that can happen. You're throwing them into the spin. If you parry and you throw their foot to the floor, you can kick their leg, and they don't really have the same direction of force to spin. And he did that a couple of times, and that was nice. Got a back body lock along the fence, really liked that, entered with a nice right straight, got the body lock, and then got to the back as Jourdain turned to start fighting the hands, and he did the Jacare move that Diego Ferreira also does, which is, once you got the back body lock, you put your foot on the fence up by about shoulder height to them, and you just drive straight off it. You throw yourself and them into the middle of the cage. And with Jacare and Ferreira, they managed to throw the opponent so far off balance that they fell to the mat, and you're still on their back. But with Burgos, he managed to throw him so that Jourdain had to balance himself, and then he jumped on his back. It's a cool technique. It does have the downside that you're throwing yourself onto your shoulder, which I really don't like, throwing yourself onto your shoulder. That's how a lot of bad shoulder dislocations happen. Ironic to be talking about that on this card because we so seldom see them, but yeah, it's a cool move. Second round was a lot of the same, a lot of work from the back body lock. Jourdain trying to tripod and get him overhead. Burgos staying on the back. Was attacking. It wasn't just holding, which, it wasn't the Aljamain Sterling, Piotr Jan sort of situation, but third round, Charles Jourdain doesn't circle the cage, stands in the center of the cage and starts striking with Burgos, and Burgos lets him. It was exactly the problem we talked about with Burgos, where he gets into these back and forth exchanges thinking like he's coming out slick, but really he's going 1 for 1. Or sometimes he's going 2 for 1, and he thinks that he's landed a good one, but the other guy's landed 2. And Jourdain really just handcuffed him with volume in that third round, managed to back him up to the fence on his own terms, land some good strikes. Burgos shot on his legs, started attacking the back body lock, and Jourdain managed to taunt him out of that position. It was so fucking funny. He's like, "Come on!" And Shane Burgos is like, "Oh, okay." He's like a big, stupid Labrador, Shane Burgos. Yeah, I mean, I liked a lot of the stuff that he did. I liked a lot of the stuff Charles Jourdain did. But I felt like Burgos, he likes moving forward, and he likes moving his head, and he likes punching on the counter offensively and landing body shots and things like that. So you think of him as an offensive fighter or even a pressure fighter. But actual pressure against Charles Jourdain, go watch Julian Erosa, who just melted him under pressure. Jourdain couldn't get much going at all in that fight, and Juicy J really, put him through the ringer. I think that's the thing with Burgos. It's not so much pressure, it's that he's walking up to you and agreeing we're going to trade. It's like that awful clip from K1 of those two Japanese fighters doing what's that game that kids play where you do the double palm high five downwards, upwards, and then together? And then they start throwing punches, and it's just so stupid. Agreeing to exchanges is it's anti-good striking. That's what you should not ever be doing. I crowdsourced my opinion on Misha Tate versus Lauren Murphy, because God knows I wasn't going to watch that. So I asked Twitter what I think of it, and they told me. I'll read you a couple. An additional case study as to why flyweight is awful if head and arm throwing to the bottom phenomenon Valentina Shevchenko has already brutalized the clear winner of this fight. The game has passed her by. Slow elbows by Murphy, flaccid takedown attempts by Tate, and both standing in front of each other, picking a combination to throw while disregarding the exchange prior. Worst fight of the whole card. I was sweeping the floor at work, I think. I think my stream was in slow motion. Should have been 5 rounds. Low intensity human connect 4 with dire physical consequences. Right, I reckon that's enough of that. Ricky Simone versus Jack Shaw. Brilliant performance from Ricky Simone. I was just watching his destruction of Rafael Assunção the other day. Assunção is an old dude now and sort of past his best. And, he's gonna be, people are going to know him for turning up on a couple of highlight reels as a knockout loss and not know how horrible it was to have to fight this guy back in the day. But Ricky Simone really did a number on him. One of the things I love about Ricky Simone is that he fights quite square, so he's always good for a sprawl, generally. But He does a wonderful job of throwing left hooks and right overhands and right hooks to the body and left hooks to the body. All your not jab punches, using his head movement, which he's definitely getting better at, because I said, he was against... I hate doing this because, I called the Uriah Faber fight perfectly, but his head was sort of on a still point throughout his bouts up to that point, and it was very easy to hit with overhands. But now Simone's got some head movement, but he's really good at just punching and level changing really short onto people's hips, and either running through them with a double leg or just getting a body lock and moving to the fence and then going really low on the butt and pulling the legs out with a double leg. But if you watch that fight with Sunsao, just like from the moment that he starts the finish, so and Sunsao gets clipped with something good, Ricky Simone moves in, level changes slightly, Sunsao's eyes and hands shoot down, and then Simone cracks him in the head with a punch and knocks him out. And that's the threat of Ricky Simone. He's great at going up and down with combinations into the entries, and he drives a frenetic pace, and he has great cardio. And Jack Shaw is Mr. Jabs and double legs, Mr. GSP. Ricky Simone came out looking to counter with the right hand across the top of the jab, and Shaw did a decent job of noticing that. The whole time he's having to fight off takedowns, there was a lot of good fence work defensively from Shaw in this fight. And then there was a really nice moment where he faked the jab knowing that Simone was trying to fire over the top. And so he faked the jab into a left kick to the body, so he leaned back and kicked Simone in the right side as Simone was throwing an overhand at where Jack Shaw wasn't. But Simone did a great job of putting pressure on him, and there were some really nice ones where he level changed and left hook to the body, and then level changed further onto a body lock or a takedown attempt. But yeah, just that pressure overall. Jack Shaw showed that he knew that Simone was trying to throw across the top of his jab, but by having to deal with the constant wrestling and the other punches to the body and so on, he forgot about it, and ignored it long enough that Simone was able to crack him across the top of the jab with the right hand and knock him down. Took the back, flattened him out with a claw grip, and got the triangle choke for the finish, arm triangle choke for the finish. It was really nice. Ricky Simone, I'm so impressed with him lately. I think I said since the Ray Borg fight, where Ray Borg wasn't very highly touted, but both of them looked pretty good in that fight on the feet. And Simone's problems, he's been good on the feet, but in sort of working on the pads sort of way. His defense had looked sort of... and I think what I've noticed with him more is... I always mention this Shigeru Igami quote, but Igami was a bit of a spiritual karate dude. Bit of a loser, and a bit of a cultist who believed in woo shit. But he did have a great phrase where he said, "Fight, kumite or fighting or whatever. It's not about just what you do. It's a relationship between the two of you." And before, I felt like Ricky Simone was throwing his hands and doing the stuff that he did in training in his fights. And in this fight, the Borg fight, I really felt like he was trying to get reads on his opponent. He was reacting to his opponent. No one's expecting you to go from one fight to the next, not doing any adaptation to the opponent, and then suddenly being able to see the matrix. But he's really come a long way in a couple of fights, and it's been very impressive. Sad for Jack Shaw, though, to lose his really impressive undefeated record on the undercard of some fight night. Actually, on the subject of learning some fucking craft, Puna Haley Soriano, or Puna as we're going to call him from now on, I remember picking him over Duska. Oh no, I didn't pick him, but I said this is probably what's going to happen against Todorovic. I said Todorovic is going to be quicker, but he never moves defensively after he's thrown stuff, so he gets sideswiped, and he's fighting in Puna Soriano. Soriano, just as a southpaw, throws these wide left swings in answer to everything. So I knew that Dusko Todorovic was going to get caught with one after landing some punches, and he did, and got knocked out. But I thought that was all Puna Soriano was going to be. I thought the big left swing, and that would be enough, because if you've got that and it's knocking people out, why would you become anything more than mirror Roy Nelson? But he lost a couple of fights, Brandon Allen and Nick Maximov. I don't even remember that Maximov fight. Oh, was that the one where he tore his own knee doing the splits in takedown defense? But in this one, he was throwing his left hand as a counter, and it was tight. It had he had a bend in the arm. It was a hook rather than a swing, and he was firing into openings. It looked really good. And in the second round, he manages to catch Dalcha with an overhand and I think an uppercut. But, I mean, Dutcher popped a rib at the end of the first round, which was unfortunate, but that stuff happens all the time in fights. The improvements from Puno were really nice. He looked like he knew what he was doing on the feet to a decent degree. Whereas against Todorovic, he was just winging these wide lefts. So he's going on boy watch. He could be a boy. He is fighting 185 pounds, and I feel like if you're even slightly good there, you look better than you look better than you are because it's such a bad weight class. But then Dustin Jacoby looked fun on the prelims, and I called him my boy, and people said, really? But he's quite fun. Just watching him hack away with the calf kicks and try and counter people with left hooks and right straights. And yeah, he smoked Da Eun-jung in a pretty decent performance. And then Bill Algeo just outpaced Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns, I mean, if you're going to try and triangle people, if you're going to try and submit people from the bottom, you, more than anyone, you need to be able to not give up when you're tired. Real shades of young Charles Oliveira here, but it's really quite common with jiu-jitsu phenoms and people who have grown up in the mindset that I don't even need to wrestle because I've got such a great guard. If they take me down, they're in more danger. But yeah, gave himself a hernia trying to finish this triangle. Algeo managed to get his elbow to the floor and lay on his side. Escaped it and just put a brilliant pace on him. And Algeo's always put a great pace on people, but Herbert Burns wilted so quickly in this fight, and yeah, just gave up. Wouldn't return to the feet when they broke. When he was on the ground and Bill Algeo stepped back, he was taking. I always remember Matt Serra's brother, who was a good grappler, but just when guys get exhausted, they just completely. They always say fatigue makes cowards of us all, but he very famously wouldn't come out of the bottom position. Like, the guy would disengage from his guard and he'd take hours to get up. And then eventually the ref just goes, no, this is a TKO. Or a submission, your call. But yeah, that was about it for this card. We got some interesting stuff happening next weekend. We got a Bellator with, Douglas Lima's in the main event, so it might not be that interesting. But Jason Jackson's going to try his hardest to get a fun fight out of him. There's some other good stuff. One of the Nurmagomedov brothers is fighting on that card. Also, a friend of the podcast and boy, George Hardwick, is fighting for the Cage Warriors lightweight title. And in the UFC, you got Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades. I mean, there's tons of stuff going on because it's UFC London. And for some reason, they've decided they like us now, and they're stacking these cards. Jack Hermanson versus Chris Curtis because Darren Till pulled out and gave us a better fight. My boy Jordan Levitt is going to take on Paddy Pimblett. Lots of fun stuff, actually, to talk about there. So we'll be back later in the week on the Boycast to talk about that. If you want to support the podcast, get the extra podcasts, get the articles, post-fight breakdowns, things like that, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Misha Tate hopefully retiring again, bless.